Hi everybody, how's it going? It's Tuesday for you, and today we're going to review part of Unit 7. So Unit 7 is cognition and then like language and thinking is in there. So what I'm going to do today I'm just going to review the basics of like the memory aspect of the unit. So we'll go through like types of processing, we'll do that information processing model with memory, and we'll do a couple things with memory, and then tomorrow we're going to move into like the thinking part of the unit, and then that little bit of the language part of that unit. So we'll take 2 days for unit 7 this week, and then I want to move into unit 8 on Friday. I think I can kind of get that into one review video. And then next week we'll do unit 9. I'm going to try to do that over 2 days because it's a little larger unit. And then we'll quickly review one day, unit 10. I'll do another quick review, unit 11. And then on Monday the 18th, there's going to be a live all-day Kahoot, which AP teachers are like submitting their questions, and you can log in anytime. I'll give you the link. But that's really fun. And again, it's really good practice because the majority of it is, your understanding of the concept. So it'll be helpful to do that Kahoot, I think. I've submitted questions from my previous Kahoots, so I think it'll be a fun time. And then you guys are going to be ready for your test on May 19th, which is so exciting. I sent you a little update on Schoology today just with the demo site. I went on and it's super easy. Some of you have reached out about, how you're going to do the test, if you're going to handwrite it, if you're going to look at or do it in a different document and then upload it, or if you're going to do it right in there. So it gives you the breakouts of what they expect when you do each of those, and it looks like a pretty simple upload. So check that out if you haven't already. And again, let me know if you're not receiving those emails from College Board, and I can kind of try to troubleshoot with you. A few of you have just had to call the College Board, and that's worked out, which has been fine. Okay, so we will get started on Unit 7. Again, don't hesitate. I love when you guys reach out to me. You're never, ever bothering me. I love it when you just say, I really don't understand this concept, and then I can get right back to you and help. So please, I want you to reach out if you don't understand something, okay? All right, here we go with Unit 7. Okay, so we're going to start out with just talking about the types of processing. So how do we get this information into our brain? And the first way is this effortful processing, and that's requiring you to actually put effort and attention into it, right? To make it stick and make it encode into your brain and into your long-term memory. So things like schoolwork, you put in effort with that. You study, you make note cards, you make Kahoots, whatever it is that you do, you put effort into it. So you put attention into it. And that makes it effortful processing. Okay, and then there's these things like automatic processing. So I could ask you if you had pizza with your friends last night, I could say, how many pieces of pizza did you have? And you could probably tell me I had 3 pieces of pizza. And that's automatic. Like you're not like having to say, oh, I need to remember that I had 3 pieces of pizza. It just happens. It's kind of like, you know what time of day breakfast is, you know what time of day things happen. So that's all this automatic processing. And it just doesn't require any effort. You just do it naturally. And then we talked about this in the beginning when you watched that video by Dr. Chu with the metacognition. He talked about deep versus shallow processing. So the deep processing, that's where you do those things like imagery. You picture things to help you remember certain topics, or you do mnemonics. I love mnemonics, like those memory tricks to help you remember things. Those are all things that you can be doing to get this information into your brain, into the long-term memory, so that you can retrieve it really easily. Okay, and that requires like distributed practice, that spacing effect, doing 10 to 20 minutes a day for the 2 weeks before the AP exam, you're gonna get a 5. Those kinds of things, those help get this information into your brain, into long-term memory where you can retrieve it really easily. And that's deep processing. And there's like lots of strategies with that. Chunking information definitely helps you do that. The loci method, that's where when we watched that TED Talk, remember he did that whole like visual, like what's in my foyer. It was Cookie Monster on the horse, those kinds of things. Those are strategies to help get this information into, like, deeply process it so then it goes into long-term memory. And then the shallow processing, that's like quick things you can be doing like 10 minutes before you go into like your AP test, like looking at, various vocab. Those are like shallow. So you just quickly looked at them. They might not make it to long-term memory, but they might stay in your short-term memory a little bit and help you on the test. So the difference though between shallow versus deep is you're actually really putting in a lot of effort into the deep processing to get it into your long-term memory. Okay, and I think I have a couple, yeah. So this little meme, I guess, it says, knows, this is about spacing and distributed practice. So it says, knows everything when cramming the night before the test. And then down here, I guess it doesn't really show for you. Oops. But it says something like you can't retrieve it like a month later or something. It was just like a cute little meme. And then this one talks about effortful processing. It says you have to study for test, dummy. You can't just put a memory stick in your ear. So this is effortful processing. That's really important to keep in mind. You're putting attention, you're putting your attention into something to make sure it goes into long-term memory. And then automatic processing, like I just talked a little bit about, it's like space. Like when you're reading a textbook, sometimes you automatically encode like the place of a picture. And you're not like looking at the picture and you're like, oh, I'm going to remember that this is in the top right-hand corner. You just kind of like remember that. And then like time is automatic. Like we unintentionally note that events take place in different times of day. Like, you eat lunch around like noon and dinner is in the evening. And then frequency, that you effortlessly keep track of things that happen to you. So, that you might have been on 80 and somebody, kind of almost cut you off. Like, it's not like you're saying to your brain, oh, I have to remember this. You just automatically remember this and then tell your friend at school. Okay, those are like frequency things. So just automatic processing is a little different than effortful processing. So just keeping those two things separate. Okay, so the stages of memory, this is super important, and this is also called the information processing model. So it's just how your memory works, right? It's just a simple, like it encodes, this is the way the information gets into your brain, right? You encode it. Storage is how you store the information, right? And then retrieval is like reactivating it or recalling it. Okay, so those are super important to know. Sometimes you'll see it as the information processing model. Sometimes you'll just see like what are the stages of memory. So just knowing that encoding is getting that info into our memory, right? Storage is keeping it in the brain, right? And if you don't use it, you lose it, and that decay might happen in that storage. And then retrieval is, again, how you get it out of the brain. Okay, and we'll talk about different stages kind of in later slides. Okay, types of memory, this is super important too. So remember, it first comes in through your sensory memory, and that's like 20 seconds quick, and it's echoic, which is hearing, and then iconic, which is the vision, and that lasts quickly for 20 seconds, okay? And then if you encode it, then it goes into that short-term working memory. Or then if it goes into this short-term memory, and that's like 20 to 30 seconds usually. And remember, that's about 7 bits of information plus or minus 2. Okay, and then at that point from the short-term memory, that's when you start to encode it into the long-term memory. And that's long-term memory is like limitless, right? It's, it holds a lot of capacity. We just don't even really know how long we can use it, I guess, until we can't retrieve it. So that's kind of like how it goes. So it goes sensory memory, and then it goes to short-term, and then long-term memory, and then that whole cycle goes back again. Okay, so things to keep in mind here. The short-term memory holds 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information, and it's about 20 to 30 seconds. And then long-term memory is limitless. It just holds a lot. And we don't know how much it holds, but it holds, more than we can imagine. Okay. All right. Let me go back. Okay. So I want to get through some of these other types of information here, or types of memory. So you'll sometimes see questions that what's the difference between explicit memory and implicit memory? And I think that this does a good job with helping with that. I wish I could get this down a little bit. Let me see. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so explicit memory, this requires your conscious awareness. So this is more like your declarative type of memory. So like things you can declare that you have a memory about, right? So semantic memory, that falls under this category, and that's like facts and general knowledge. So like who was the first president? We know it was George Washington. That's like semantic memory, and that's a part of explicit. So again, explicit requires conscious awareness. So you consciously retrieve it, and that's housed in the hippocampus, okay? All memory of all learning of new memories is processed through the hippocampus with the explicit memory, okay? Another aspect of explicit memory is the episodic memory, and that's those personally experienced events, so like episodes from your life, okay? So again, explicit is declarative memory. We can declare we have that memory. It's conscious recollection, right? We have that conscious awareness of it. And the two types are episodic, which are your scenes from your life, basically, and then semantic, which is facts, okay? So the opposite of that then is implicit memory, and that doesn't require any conscious awareness. Like you're not thinking about the first time you brushed your teeth, right? Like you just know how to brush your teeth, right? So it's like, it doesn't require you to be like, okay, I take my toothbrush out and I put this and I do this. Like you just know how to brush your teeth. Okay, so that's implicit memory. And the kind of the categories underneath implicit memory, that's where procedural memory is. And we remember from the biology unit that procedural memory, that's more housed in the cerebellum part of the brain. So versus the hippocampus, which is all explicit, that's where all explicit memories are housed, in the hippocampus. Procedural memory is more in the cerebellum, because that's where the procedural memory is. And those are things like that have your motor and your cognitive skills with it. So, you know, your procedural memory on how to play a piano, how to ride a bike, how to drive a car. You're not like thinking, oh, I have to turn the car this way every time. Your body just knows how to make a right turn, or how to reverse. Like that's all procedural memory, okay? Another aspect under implicit memory is priming, and we know that from the last couple units. Priming is that enhanced identification of objects and words. That's in implicit memory, and then also learning through classical conditioning, that is in the implicit memory as well. Okay, I think I got everything with that. There's so much in this unit, and I love this unit so much. I just want to make sure that we're getting all through this memory part. Okay, so the hippocampus, that's this little pretty teal color thing here. It looks kind of like a worm or a snail, and that's the area of the brain that holds memory, and that's where mostly explicit memories are held. The cerebellum is where most of the procedural or implicit memories are held. Okay. So this is just a nice little. So if we forget things, or you know, if we have like storage or retrieval issues, you know, we forget things, right? Let me see if I can try to move that up. Okay, maybe I can't. All right, so let me move my face a little bit. I'm gonna put it right here. Okay, so we remember proactive interference. So when we're thinking about interference, this is where, you know, like you forget, right? And we can forget things easily. It's totally normal to do that. But there's something called proactive interference, and that's where old information hinders the recall of new information. And then we have the retroactive interference, and that's where new information hinders the recall of old information. So these are super important. Remember the mnemonic with this one, the PO and the RN with the That little handy dandy mnemonic should help you with this. So proactive information is you're forgetting old, so P and O go together. And then retroactive interference, R and N go together. So retroactive and new information you're forgetting. So some examples of this would be, you learn your combination to your high school locker, right? And then the memory of an old locker interferes with the recall of the gym locker, right? So old information is getting in the way of new. And then retroactive interference is that new information hinders recall of old information. So, your knowledge of a new email, right? You get a new email when you go to college. It's going to be so exciting. So that new email is going to interfere with the recall of an old email address. Okay? All right. Don't forget that mnemonic with that. Okay, and then we have this amnesia that can sometimes happen if you have an injury or like a brain trauma. You can get anterior grade versus retrograde amnesia. Okay, so retrograde amnesia, if you're talking about amnesia, that's where you're forgetting things. So retrograde amnesia, retro, is you're forgetting past events, where anterior grade, you're forgetting future events. Okay, and you can't recall like new information. Okay, so new information is anterior grade, retrograde is old information. You can't remember old information. So with Dory, remember this was our mnemonic on the Prezi that we had when we studied this unit. She had anterior grade amnesia, right? She couldn't remember anything new. So she would meet you and then she would say, "Oh, hi, I'm Dory." And she continuously couldn't remember like new information. Okay, so anterior grade new, retrograde is old. Okay, long-term potentiation. We talked a little bit about this in the bio unit, but just to repeat what we talked about, with long-term potentiation, this is like your neurons lifting weights, right? So they get stronger and stronger. And it's the same thing when you study and you practice and you recall. All of those things, those are like, the neurons like getting bigger and studying and being and multiplying and just getting really strong. So that's called long-term potentiation. And you can just see a quick little visual of this. Like this is like the initial state with like, your neurons and the acetylcholine because it helps with the memory, right? When you completely do this over and over and over again, like this repeated stimulation, then look at this like a week later, then now you've got more receptor sites. So you have gotten more of that long-term potentiation and those neurons get stronger. Okay, so that's just like a nice little visual. Recall versus recognition. So remember, you're recalling all about AP Psych on the AP Psych exam this year. There's no recognition, right? Recognition is all multiple choice questions, right? So you guys are recalling information on that. So that's the difference with recall and recognition is you can kind of, with recognition, you get some little like, you can kind of, decipher with multiple choice, where recall, you're really like having to give them all the information. But you're going to do great. And then don't forget the serial position effect. That is where we recall typically either things at the beginning of our list or at the end of the list, right? There's this middle part that we're forgetting about here, and that's why it's so low here. And we did this in class, right? We did, I gave you that list of all those words, and typically you guys got the beginning words and you got the end words, but you didn't get the middle words. And it's the same way with like my grocery list. If I forget it at home, I can kind of remember what I put on the beginning or the end, but I tend to forget about that middle piece of it. And primacy effect with the serial position, that one is remembering the beginning part of the list, where recency effect is remembering the end of the list. So primacy is the beginning, recency is the end. Okay, just to kind of clarify those. Flashbulb memory. This is any vivid memory that you remember for like a highly important event. So 9/11, you weren't born yet, but I know exactly where I was when I found out, at 8:52 or whatever it was, that the 9/11 attack. Same with like Lakeland school shooting. I remember where I was, what was happening, Boston bombing, same thing. So those are flashbulb memories, just vivid memories for highly important events. Okay, so we are done. I did that in under 20 minutes. I'm getting so good at these videos. No. So review of Unit 7, just half of the unit. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the thinking component of that unit and the language. The language is really small. The thinking part is very similar to this. So I'm going to try to do that very quickly too. You have a short FRQ on Schoology. Don't hesitate to reach out. I miss you all. And I hope you're enjoying this beautiful weather outside. I feel like the sun is making such a difference. Okay, take care.